Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about contribution, how to add more value, how to take on both small and large projects, and what that looks like for most firms. So, first off, let's start with contribution, right? This is like one of those big amorphous terms that is like value, right? How do I get better? How do I provide more value? What does value actually mean? And let's start to break this down. So, in construction, what does this actually look like? It means asking questions, honestly, like from the design side and even on the construction side. It's asking questions to try to get ahead of problems, right? To think ahead, to think of what's coming, what the company might need in their factory or in their hospital or office or whatever you're doing, right? Is to think of these questions to get ahead of any problems that might present themselves. And that's a huge item that really helps owners a ton think through what they're going to need and allows you to basically specify what's going on in the projects. The next thing that I want to talk about, so really in contribution and value, that's the biggest thing, is if you can think down the line how you're going to make something better, how you're going to solve problems before they happen. One example is in manufacturing plants is, hey, what does these processes look like? When do the lines start and operate? Because if they all start and operate at the same time, I can't have any diversity in my load. I have to assume, or I'm then making the assumption and calculation that everything is going to run simultaneously within that plant, and I can't reduce the electrical service size because everything's going to run simultaneously. Now, if you tell me that, hey, we're never going to run these things simultaneously, well, now you can apply a diversity factor in the load to then account for things being on or off at different times. And so that allows you to reduce the size of the electrical gear and reduce the cost of the project. So a lot of this has to do with their operations. Like, how are you operating? What are you doing? Um, how is this going to run? Are you going to run this at the same time as this other piece of gear? Are they interlocked to where they can't run at the same time? Would there be any times that you would run this simultaneously? Right. Those are all the questions that you've got to answer. And with that, then you can again size the loads appropriately. There's a lot of things like lighting and receptacle loads that have kind of built-in calculations. But when you get into plants and manufacturing facilities, you have to understand really a lot about their operation and how it runs in order to size the gear appropriately and kind of reduce sizes where you can. The the next thing, and again, those questions before I get in, like saying before I get into all that, the thing on value contribution, asking these questions, this would be the same in like phasing of projects. Like, how are we going to phase this stuff in? Do you want to phase it, right? Do you want to in a big like storage facility, are you gonna you need the front office, right? So everyone can go and buy their storage unit. Then we're going to build X number of storage units. Then once those fill up, we get some cash flow in, we see demand, all that kind of stuff. Then we can go on and build phase two. Maybe it's in a year, maybe it's in 2 years, but you can phase that out. And then the mechanical, electrical, civil guys can have an idea of what that looks like. And maybe you don't need anything pre-piped in, and maybe you just want to handle grading up front for phase two expansion, where you do all the site work, civil stuff up front, and then you'll deal with mechanical, plumbing, and structure architecture, right, with those next buildings whenever they get put up for like a storage project, or could be schools, right? And you're going to do it in different phases. Hey, we're going to build the gym this year. We're going to build the classroom wing next year. We're going to build the auditorium the year after that, whatever it might be in phasing of these projects, right? And then thinking through how we're going to do that, what we're going to do. Are we going to do all the site work once for everything? And then we'll come back in and deal with the rest of it. Okay, what utilities do we need to pipe to those buildings while we're dealing with the underground? How are we going to handle that? Where are these buildings going to be fed from? All those questions need to get answered. And the sooner you can do that, it's going to help really in understanding the project. And so you don't have to go necessarily back and redo things, but at the same time, you might be okay with kind of undoing and redoing it, right? Opening up a trench again, retrenching stuff. That might be just part of it, and you're okay with that, but at least you know it going into the project on kind of what's required, what you're going to execute, and be able to move from there. Um, the next thing that want to talk about is this thing of small and large projects. So I was talking to a firm the other day for some of our automation software, and especially how it's a hot topic to talk about with automation and AI and all that kind of good stuff that we do at Cowabunga Studios and automating the electrical layouts for folks on our new product on automatically circuiting receptacles and electrical fixtures within the project and creating your panel schedules and all that kind of good stuff throughout a Revit model. And so, and talking to this firm, and they're fairly big. They've got, I think, 50 electrical engineers, which is, very good sized firm. And so with that, they have this thing of what how they allocate resources, how they train younger staff, and then their project mix between small and large projects. And it's really one of the biggest and most complicated challenges that really a lot of firms have is you have this split maybe of large and small projects. Maybe you haven't even done that split within your firm to have a small projects division and a large projects division. Maybe you do. And then you have this kind of thing where it's glorified to be on the large projects team, where maybe a small projects team, if you had, let's say that you were managing, I don't know, 10 projects, each with a, build value of 3 million. So now you're really managing a 30 million project, where that would be, it's equivalent to what you would have on the large project side of it. So really it ends up being equivalent in dollar values or construction value that you would be dealing with. It just, you have a lot more to handle on the small projects versus the large projects. The small projects might not be as complicated as the large projects. The small projects might be for 10 different clients. And so you have this mix that you really you've got to solve, right? So some of the stuff in the large project, again, might be more complex. So you need somebody that has dealt with the complexity of projects, but you also need somebody on the small project side when you have, again, a lot more projects to handle, somebody who's just as organized, just as good in handling all of this volume on the small project side. So there's a lot more kind of management needs on that small project side versus the large project side is you have one project, you have one thing to take care of. You're just solving a different problem, right? It's a problem of scale, which you effectively have on the small project side. If you're dealing, again, if you add all the small projects up, you're dealing with something of comparable size. The small projects usually are quick hitters. So that's another piece of this, right? You have something that comes in, goes out, maybe with a week, 2 week on the design side, or a few months on the construction side. So you've got to be able to handle both of that. And this is why a lot of firms just don't take small projects anymore. However, those small projects often turn into big projects or bigger clients or what have you. And so it's understanding of what that project split looks like, who you allocate to those different projects and the complexity of the projects. And then also how you staff them for not just the management side, but for the doing of the project. Because we all learn through repetition, right? The more that you do something, the more that you see something, the better you're going to get at it. And with that, it almost behooves you to put junior staff on some of these smaller projects, right? So again, if you have the example of 10 projects, and let's say that you have 4 or 5 junior staff, so then each junior staff would get 1 to 2 projects. And so this allows them to get more reps in faster, right? They see more projects, they set up more projects, they do more projects, they run all the calculations, they do the outline, they do all this stuff. And then that allows them to effectively get more reps, get better at what they're doing. And then from there they can move up into bigger projects, what have you. But still overseeing all of that work needs to be a very experienced project manager or reviewer so that, again, they're checking all the junior staff's work, providing them feedback, but it's these very tight feedback cycles. And then again, very experienced project manager that's able to kind of keep track of everything, all those projects going on, what's going on, be able to review with the staff those projects. And that's probably one of the biggest downfalls in a lot of firms, right? Is this project mix and split of big projects, small projects, who's handling them, how to train junior staff, get them up to speed so they're able to handle those projects, and get the repetitions they need in to learn. So a lot of this comes down to, again, like training. It comes down to workforce preparation. It comes down to project split between big and small projects. And this is just one of those things that's been super top of mind, right? Is providing value, being able to train staff, and that project split between big and small projects, and then really in contributing and providing value in your own role, right? So contribution of contributing to projects, contributing to the overall health of the firm, contributing to your owners. And again, a lot of this is just thinking further down the road of what they're going to need, doing that sooner in the project. And that's going to end up netting you a ton of extra benefit. So some of the ways that we've been able to do this is by providing additional information or information that would be needed later in a project. And we just do it much sooner in a project to kind of give some ideas, some rough calculations, some rough sketches of what this is going to look like, so we can get a better idea in budgeting and going after these projects, really to show guys that, hey, not only are we interested, we're doing kind of work above and beyond to show that we're going to do great on this project. We're going to help you win it, and really go above and beyond earlier in the whole process. Just nets a lot of goodwill for everybody involved. The thing with doing that, though, is you do have to have the time, you do have to have the resources allocated, and in doing projects that you might not have won yet, is a kind of a catch-22 in a way, right? You're doing work that means you might not win it, but if you don't do it, you have a less probability of winning, right? So doing this extra work adds a likelihood of winning. So you're more likely to win more projects, but you're still going to put in effort on projects that you aren't going to win anyway. So again, you got to have the time and resources available to add that extra effort on the front end of these projects to ultimately win it. So in construction, it's one of those big things that, again, putting more design effort in, more upfront to projects is going to net you a lot more in the long run. It just is a lot more effort upfront to ensure that. The same goes with training. The same goes with project management. The same goes with resource allocation. Is you're going to have to really think through how are you going to split a firm. You're going to have a small projects division. You're going to have a large projects division. You need still a talent around each of those, because it's just a very different skill set, right? You have small projects. You have a high volume. You need to have somebody that manages those really well, that's able to review and QA and QC those projects. Versus a large project where you're just going to be working at it for a while, right? You're going to be kind of grinding along on those projects for a long period of time. So it's one of those things of you have to have great people on both, and it's just how do they do with kind of big projects and chewing them down, and then the same on small projects and managing them. Same effective volume of work. You just have a lot more frequency with the smaller projects, right? Hitting more deliverables, attending more meetings, probably dealing with more clients. And on a big project, you're just kind of working and grinding for that for a longer period of time. So super important thing to kind of delineate within your firm and how you're going to handle that. Then again, break that firm down into who's going to handle it, what staff do you need where, and then how are you going to train up junior staff? Which projects do you have them work on? How do they handle things? When do they move over to big projects, or do you have them work on portions of big projects? And really thinking through how that looks in an ideal situation, and then being able to diverge from that ideal to what you're actually going to do is something that you can kind of ad hoc go through and as different scenarios come up. But it's good to have kind of a baseline of what we expect to do, what we expect to have happen, and where we're going to ultimately move forward from. So those are the kind of two big things that I wanted to talk through on this, and basically being able to manage your time, manage your projects, how you delineate within your firm, what you're going to do. And lastly is you've got to be able to think through all of this, right? Like, how do you think through value creation? What is value creation for you and your firm? And how do you think through that? What's a list of questions that you're going to have, and how do you think through those? How do you provide more value? What's the things you're going to do? And then again, breaking down roles, responsibilities, and what you look for in each and every one of your projects. So again, super big, important things that you need to look through as your projects. And these are just points to think about as you go through your projects, as you build your firm, as you become more experienced through all of these. These are the hurdles that you're going to have, right? How do you provide more? How do you want clients to continue to work with you? And ultimately, how do you serve them the best? And that comes down to the structure of your firm and training your people. So that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.